Everybody, and welcome to another football transfer forum. It's half term, which means the kids are off. I've slightly sedated my kids in the lounge, so they should be good for about an hour and a half, I reckon. And it's great to have everybody join us this morning. If you haven't noticed before, we're now sporting a fancy new logo, which I really like. I didn't like, but now I do like. Tony and I are booked in to the tattooist next week to get a big version of it done on our back. So we're looking forward to that. But I'm more looking forward to the session that we've got planned this morning. Bit of housekeeping before I introduce everybody. If you want to share your contact details, your Twitter address, your LinkedIn address, anything of that nature, please do so in the chat box. If you've got any questions for any of our guests this morning, please put it in the Q&A box. Makes my life much easier. Good morning, Tony. How are you?
Yeah, Ryan, I'm great, thank you. I feel like we've sort of broke up for the summer. Well, that means the leagues are more or less finished apart from the National League. But obviously, in the football agent world, we're just starting for the summer transfer window. So I sort of feel like I've had a couple of days of sun and then right back into getting on with the transfer business. So, yeah, but I'm good. Thanks, Ryan.
Excellent. And our regular guest, Guy Branson, loan manager at Leicester City. Guy, I was a bit nervous about this colour on the shirt, but you've saved the day because you're wearing exactly the same. How are you? I mean, first of all, congratulations on the FA Cup win for Leicester. Just give us a little sort of glory story of what the past few weeks has been like at Leicester.
Well, I've had a lot of texts for not much involvement, which has been great for me personally. But it's one of them situations where, you know, it's amazing what's going on with the first team group. It was great to have Luke Thomas on personally from a personal point of view because I was involved in his coaching and his progression. So, and a lot of lads that were in the squad were involved from the loans as well. So I've had a few of their insights and I would say Snapchats and Instagram stories. I've seen a few of the footage. So it's been excellent and it's great for the city. The city's been, you know, buzzing from the back of it, and I've had a lot of chats from, you know, friends and family as a Leicester fan. So it's been brilliant times.
Any disappointment of missing out on the last day for the Champions League spot?
Yeah, there's always going to be disappointments because we were aiming for that, but to be categorised as, you know, one of the top six and an FA Cup winner at the end of the season, I think anyone would have snapped your hands off for that. And you know, we're always going to strive for better. That's the football club we're at. We're always the so-called underdog in that group, and you know, we've got a lot of fight in us, and I think a lot of the staff would appreciate that comment.
Fantastic. And this morning we are really overwhelmingly excited about having Martyn Glover, head of scouting and recruitment at Southampton Football Club, join us. Good morning, Martyn.
Morning, everybody. Big build-up, by the way. Not sure about that.
He likes a big build-up, Martyn.
I do.
I never get the big build-up though. It's usually just the guests and Guy.
Oh, cheers.
Martyn, obviously, as Tony alluded to, whilst the season for the players and the performance staff has started to wind down, for the agents and you guys, I guess it's winding up.
Yeah, it's difficult managing this period, really. I think it's always the hardest part because everybody sort of clears off now. So players trying to get away on holiday, managers are a little bit the same. So in a weird way, you end up trying to do a lot to get things done early and get on with things. But it's very difficult to do that because people aren't where you want them to be. So it's sort of a strange sort of period. I always think it's difficult. It's usually kicks off in the next week or so, then people start to settle down and have had a bit of a breather and they're more ready to get on with things and progress things. But yeah, it's certainly a period where you're trying hard now to get things done and get organised so they're into pre-season.
I think the whole of the football industry has decamped to Portugal. I mean, we should be doing our webinar from a beach near Albufeira or something like that, shouldn't we? Because I think that's where most of the people from football are at the moment.
Yeah,
so,
I think you're off to Portugal next week, aren't you, Guy?
Yeah, I'm in Portugal next week, so I'll be networking to death. Over a few beers. I'm sure I'll know a few people over there, which is great. And I've already set up a few coffees and a few bagels.
Excellent. Right, well, let's just have a quick look through what we're going to get through this morning. As I say, we're really appreciative of Martyn's time this morning, and we've got the initial session with him over the next half an hour. We're then going to be joined by Jim Rainford, sports broker at Miller Insurance Services. Really interesting part of the football industry. Jim works specifically with career-ending insurance, whilst one might think that that's something that has now absorbed itself into being a very organised thing in football. It's actually there's quite a few loose ends on that, and some high-profile injuries this season where players didn't have that type of cover attached to it. So Jim also looks after the vast majority of the England squad. So it's going to be interesting to hear what he has to say. And Tony, Jim has his finger on the pulse of who might be coming to the UK as well, because first port of call is a call into him, isn't it?
Well, you say that, Ryan, but I think people are doing the business behind closed doors, and obviously Jim's got to keep things very confidential in terms of who's taking out insurance, and we know one big player. And here is Jim, actually. We know one big player who could potentially be coming here, but that's just a rumour. But I see Jim's just connecting there. Hi, Jim.
Hi, Tony. You okay? Sorry we're late.
That's fine. Hi, Jim.
We were just talking about you, Jim. Ryan was just going through the programme for today, so we just give you a little bit of a mention there.
All right. Okay. Cheers, guys.
I was just saying how you're going to reveal all the summer transfers because you're the first port of call.
Yeah, insider information.
This is it. And after we've heard from Jim, we're going to get into a panel discussion around the summer transfer window here in the Premier League. And of course, as always, we'll leave plenty of time for questions at the end. As I say, if you've got any questions, please get them in the Q&A box. But let's start by reintroducing Martyn. Thank you again for your time this morning. First question really from myself is if you wouldn't mind just giving a bit of a sort of shortened history of what your journey has been in terms of ending up in the position that you are now, and how did you go about it? I think when we spoke the other day, you often get asked, well, how did you end up in the position that you did? So, yeah, it'd be great just to hear that just to begin with.
A quick potted history. Okay. I think I was speaking before earlier with Tony just about my sort of starting point was a PE teacher. So I went sort of through that route really. So that gave me access to coaching and being involved with the academy at Blackburn on a part-time basis. And then when academy started, that got me a full-time role effectively. So I moved from teaching into the academy side of things and the youth side of things, etc. at Blackburn Rovers. And I spent 13 years there. So the majority of that was with the academy and doing the youth recruitment and heading that up. And then eventually trying to find a way into working in the senior side. I think that's always the biggest sort of transition really, or people sort of struggle to make that transition across and how that's going to work. Fortunately, I was able to do that and transition into the first team side of it. And then ultimately within a very short period of time, I was sort of chief scout at Blackburn. So that was end of 13 years there. There was lots of change at Blackburn Rovers and with new ownership and sort of weird sort of direction really. So although I love the club to death and still live in a weird way in the area, then that was the time to do something different. And I moved down to West Ham as chief scout and then head of recruitment at West Ham. We spent 4 years there, so it was a good time. Took over in the Championship. We got them promoted first time round, and then 3 years in the Premier League, which I quite enjoyed. And certainly at West Ham, everybody would know it as it's a different sort of club in many ways. It certainly was in the old days, with ownership that are very hands-on and very involved in what you do. So it was a very steep learning curve of something completely different for me, which actually in hindsight, when you look back, was actually really good. But it was very, very intense. You couldn't get away from that. It was a surreal sort of period to never be off emails and off the phone with ownership, which was very strange. But I enjoyed it. And then following that, when that came to an end, they decided to go in a different direction, which was fine. I spent a short time at Leeds in very unusual circumstances with it, probably even stranger owner, Mr. Cellino. And so I had a period there, and then on to Sunderland. So we kept Sunderland in the league, and then I went to Everton. So I went to Everton with Steve Walsh, and we spent sort of 3 years at Everton. And then I got the opportunity to move to Southampton for a role for me, which was just not like going back in time, but it's a little bit like how things were at Blackburn, in that it was a smaller club, smaller top end. You felt like you could have more of an impact on what was going on, more of an involvement, and you felt closer, more connected to everything. And that's probably what I wanted. I needed to feel like, not you valued, but felt like you had a worth and there was a point to what you were doing and you did have a say. And I certainly got that at Southampton. I got the feeling of that. So that was a big decision to make, because Everton in some way was comfortable and I enjoyed it, and some great people there and had a great time. But it was an opportunity really at that stage that I just thought was right for me at the time. So that was a decision I made to go down there. And yeah, a good 2 years at Southampton. So
fantastic. And so Southampton have now got really a sort of long-standing pedigree of both producing their own players and selling them on, but also some great recruitment directly into the first team as well. And that has passed through many people that are in your position. What's your observation about why they're able to do that?
I think in many ways the important bit, and I think this is what Southampton have historically always got right. I think we'd be open to say there's probably a spell where that went awry a little bit, and some mistakes were made. But I think the principle behind it is Southampton know what they are as a club. And I think that if you know that at the core of what you're about and what you're trying to achieve and how you will do that and be realistic about that, then that gives you a chance and a success. And I think Southampton's always been about developing and producing. And a lot of the recruitment we do now will be around young players or younger players that are probably at that step where they're ready to step into the Premier League, but at the early stages of that, and that they need development. And that's what we think we are good at. That's what we think we offer. And we have a manager in place who wants to do exactly the same. So it sort of marries up really well, and people buy into that project about what Southampton's about. So we've no illusions that, we're not one of the big six clubs. We'll probably never be that. And we don't pretend to try to be that. We know where we are. We know we're fit in the overall structure within the Premier League. And we just try to do what we do very, very well. And I think if the club is focused on that, and you get that, people call it DNA, call it whatever you like now. But I think if you know what that is within your club and you stick to your principles, then you give yourself a chance.
And Martyn, do you feel that, in recruitment terms, you're in competition with the likes of your Leicesters, your Villas, your Newcastle Uniteds, Burnley potentially? Are you in the same sort of market and the same sort of recruitment space as those clubs? You've said you're not. You'll never potentially be a top six unless you get a massive investor comes in, of course, which can change the dynamic very quickly. But just in certain way, you're sort of pitching yourself. Is that how you see it? Yeah,
I think so. I think our sort of thing is always to be, if you'll call it, best of the rest, don't you? Really, I think that's where you sort of are, and I think that's what we aim to be. And so it would be nice to position ourselves that you become a top 10 club predominantly every year, really, and you're part of that. And then you might have a season or two where you do really well and you make Europe or something like that, and that's great. But I think that's where we want to be. That's where we aspire to be. And I think putting the groundwork in now with what we do in terms of recruitment, but what we do in the whole structure of the football club is important to make sure once you can get there, and then two, you can sustain it. And I think that's what we're about, really. And the model in terms of what we spend and the age which we spend it on, and how we develop players and so on, is all got to come together to make that happen. And I think that's where we're at the minute.
I mean, it's nice that Liverpool have spent money with Southampton over the years as well, isn't it? It's always nice when they come knocking for one of your prize assets, I suppose.
Yeah, no, we have a benefactor from Liverpool. Really, we've done very well out of that over the years. But hopefully that's testament to the work that's gone on and the players that have been developed, and that's what you want to continue, really. And we're not shy of that. If we can produce players that are ready to go and play in Liverpool's first team or Man United's or Chelsea's or whatever, then that's fine. That's great. That's what we're about. That's what we hopefully we provide that vehicle and the access for players to do that and get them there, and then we can reinvest and do it again. I think that's important. That's what football should be about.
Martyn,
did you have a question?
Yeah, please. In regards to the recruitment process, when you're targeting players to come into your, I would say, under 23s down, are you opening the door to them to say, look, this is the process, we're going to send you here, here and here, we're going to put you into the B first, then the 23s, then the first team? Are you openly explaining that pathway to really get the best players? And are you doing that I would say, in-depth recruitment? I imagine you are. Just wanted to really open up the floor to it and try and understand some sort of processes that go on.
Yeah, I think we've been fairly open about. We had a restructure of the football club, and Matt Crocker led that, and it was important to put certain things in place. And part of that was a pathways department, if you like, in itself, that looks after the development of players and the player pathway for them. And that's massively about what we're about now for those young players. And so when we're selling the project, if you like, to a young player, then it's important they know what the direction is and how this is going to work. And it's not a science. You can't say, by this date you will do that, because that's not always the case. But I think as long as you have a general overview of, look, this is we think is a realistic timescale. This is what we expect you to be able to do with your talent and ability and with what we can do, then I think that's key. And then it's just managing that top end of that, of like when they're ready to be around that first team group, or when it might need a loan to help that process and be part of that. But it's being engaged with the players and the people around them, so they understand what that process is, what it looks like, and where they should expect to go, and we can do for them, I hope.
I also think, just in regards to your safety net of that, when you're doing that as a club, in my opinion, when you're doing that at a club and setting that process out to the agent, the player and the parents, it also covers you on the end game. When this player is then released or sold on or moved on, however you want to do it, the honesty and the transparency from the football clubs that's been there originally at the starting point. And this is a huge thing now that's coming out, obviously, with the empathy and the aftercare and obviously the exit strategy of these clubs. It was explained at the start. That's the pathway. It hasn't been achieved, or it has been achieved, and let's move on together on the way out. And I think if you've got that transparency like Southampton have, and like luckily we have, I think the clubs are backed up with the Premier League and the various things that come with it.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. And I think the important bit for us was to have those designated people who take proper responsibility for it. So we got Danny Butterfield who heads that up now, and it's important because we all do it and we all have a part to play in that process. But you do need people who are looking after it on a daily basis and are concerned about that being their area, and things don't get missed or don't get left. And it's very easy to leave things around. Yeah, I'll speak to so-and-so next week. And certainly when with the pandemic on and the bubbles that were created, then you're not in the building hardly at all, if at all. And so it's been really important to make sure those discussions and that development for those players and their interaction is done by somebody, and somebody takes responsibility. And that's, hopefully now we've got that in place, and that should just get better and better, we hope.
Good stuff.
Thanks,
Martyn, could you just talk to us then about the structures that you've got at the club? How many people are you responsible for? Where are they based? Are they all in the UK? Do you have people all over the world? Whereabouts at Southampton looking for players?
Yeah, we've got, I explained before, we went through a restructure of what we do and how we do it. But I think that we just try and get some sense of and work probably more down a full-time model, and that's what we've done recently, certainly with the first team. And so yeah, we've got a team of guys in the UK who look after the UK and spread through the UK, who do that, and then we've got a similar sort of structure abroad now. So we've got we've 4 and then 1 overseeing as well, effectively 5 who look after the foreign markets, and we'll add to that a little bit over this summer period, I hope, as well. So that's the way we sort of divide that up. And then in the UK side of things, then we obviously got the analysis boys. So we've got an analysis department working purely on recruitment, and we've got the data science, we've got the pathways department. So we've got lots of areas then that are all covered within recruitment to make sure we have everything as best we can boxed off, and people who can take full responsibility for their area. I think that's important for me. I've worked sort of in different ways all the way through, really, and it's nice when it's small and compact and people, you're in touch with people all the time. But I think I've learned over this sort of last few years, really, probably more so than ever, that you've got to give people responsibility and let them to run their areas and trust them to do their jobs. And I think if you get the right people and that works, then then it's terrific. And that's what we're sort of benefiting now from at Southampton. We've got a structure in place that makes sense. People know their roles, know what the responsibilities are, and we come together all the time to make hopefully good decisions. And I think that combined approach is the key to everything now.
Something that we've spoken a lot about on this webinar over the past couple of months is obviously the effects of Brexit, the GBE situation. How much has that changed what you're doing in terms of where you're looking, who you're looking for?
I think it affected us a little bit in terms of where we had our scouting. So when we were going through that process, we're aware of that, and we're conscious of where we thought we needed people and where would have the best benefit really to have staff, certainly abroad. And then we've got a little bit of a mindset in the summer to probably add one or two staff based further away. So you've got new markets now. So whereas once upon a time a good market for Southampton might have been Eastern European teams and whatever, or clubs where you can get sometimes some lower value players, etc., that can have an impact. And we've done it successfully with people like Jan Bednarek and people like that in the past. That's a difficult market now currently by the nature of where they sit in the GBA status and getting those players in. And so it was key really for us to be aware of that. And now you've got markets such as South America, which before was very difficult, which is now more open. So you've got an opportunity in that part of the world. But I think the way we try to do things, and we've tried, is not just to react. It's to try and we have to react, but we react in a sensible way, in a steady approach, and get people in place and do the right things. It's very easy to say, right, okay, we can do South America now. Let's jump on a plane and go and find some players. It's like, no. We need to do it in a structured way, in a sensible way to make good decisions. And I think that's what we're heading into this summer to have a look at and try and establish something there, and a market we can potentially look to move into.
I'm happy to come along and help in that process, Martyn.
Martyn, it's a massive South America, obviously.
It's too much for you to do by yourself, Martyn. You need help.
Yeah, I think it's a great market. It's a market I've been to several times in the past, and I genuinely love it when I go. It's a very different experience if you go and watch football in South America. It is. People always say it's more like a religion, and for anybody who's been and they see it, it really is. It's an incredible sort of place to go and watch football. So I genuinely love it, and hopefully it's something we can do a little bit of now and develop while I'm at Southampton. And hopefully it won't just be me. I think Ian Torrance is head of the international scouting and where we'll do quite a bit of that. But yeah, I certainly will accompany him. There's no problem at all.
Martyn, obviously Brazil and Argentina are massive football countries and marketplaces, and historically, I suppose they've come into Portugal and Spain, and then the Premier League clubs have had to buy them at a real cost. So that landing in Portugal and Spain and other countries, and I think the Premier League have obviously had a good input into the GBE with sort of saying we want to buy direct from Argentina and Brazil. Is it just those two countries, or is there other countries of interest in South America? And also, what are the difficulties with those guys first landing in the Premier League, so to speak?
I think they at the first run through for us will be the main sort of countries that we would prioritise. And again, for GBE reasons, it's access from those countries easier than going to other parts of South America, to be fair. So that would be our initial sort of protocol, and it's the countries that I've been to in the past, so I'm a bit more comfortable there as well. Well, comfortable is probably the wrong word, but I've been and I sort of know it a little bit. So I think that's where the outset would be. I think that the other side to this, and that's the biggest bit, is it's easy to go and identify talent. It's harder when they're that far away to know the backgrounds of some of these players and where they come from, etc. And I think that's really, really important to get that right, because that transition and that settling in period in the UK can be a big ask. And I think as part of that as well, then you've got to make sure the structure's in place in your club for when these players arrive, that you can support them and help them to settle and so on. I think that for me, they're the sort of vital ingredients, and it's something that we'll look carefully to do. So, as I was saying before, you don't want to just whiz out and grab somebody. You've got to make sure things are in place, so when they actually do come, we're ready to go and we're set up for it, and we can hopefully try to get things right at the outset.
You'll obviously speak to your colleagues in other clubs, and you'll get a sort of gauge on what they're doing. is there a bit of everybody sort of looking at each other, that Spider-Man meme a little bit, in terms of where people are going to appoint people, what markets they're going to look at post-Brexit, post this GBE situation? I know some clubs are looking really heavily at Mexico, and then there's others that are looking over, you know, in Australasia, and because like you said, it's a completely different ball game now, isn't it?
Yeah, it's changed. I think we're all becoming aware of what other people are doing and where they might start doing the scouting and how that might change. So I think that's definitely been the case. We've just done a lot of work internally in terms of what we think is the right markets, what is the best fit for us, and then again just trying to get an approach which you can, it's a big world out there, but there's only so much you can realistically do and do it properly. And I think that our view is to make that expansion slowly and steadily, to make good decisions and put people in, because what they need is support. There's nothing, it's easy to appoint a scout in a foreign country, but it's not as easy to support them and to be able to go and follow that up and follow their suggestions up and so on, and be part of the process. And I think it's important that if we're going to go into those markets, that we can support it properly, we can do the work that helps them and get onto the right players, and then ultimately make the right decisions. So yeah, there's a whole thing there. It's easy to say it's easier for them, but it is. Some of the bigger clubs have been in these markets for a long time, and they've got great networks, and because of the finance involved and the staff that they can support it. I think we have to be a little bit smarter than that, because we just can't throw money at this, and we'll do it steadily, but in the same way that we can then support it and make sure we're ready for, if we do sign somebody, ultimately we've got the setup to deal with it when they come over here.
Guy?
Just in regards to the trends that we were speaking about there, scouting trends, what are you seeing in regards to player trends that's new? I mean, I do want to tap into your experience, obviously, but some of the stuff that we're doing on these courses and with the FA, we're talking about looking at the next 5 years and the 10 years of the way football's changing, and a lot of the stuff that I'm looking into now is trends of players, styles of play, also styles of players, different types of players that are out there. And what are you seeing with your history now, and obviously experience in the past, but bring it to the future? What are you seeing that's developing that's not really been there from the last, say, 5 years to the new 5 years coming ahead?
I think there's been a genuine move over here, in terms of how teams play and how we play the game, and it's a very different style now to what it was years ago. And I think that's the acceptance of that amongst what the general public and the fans expect to see as well. And I think that's key now, that the days of playing football in a certain style that's not necessarily appealing to the eye have probably gone now. The expectation is that you play good football and entertaining football, and have players that can do that and can excite people. And I think that's the more you go through a lockdown period and everybody's watching everything, and you are watching everything on TV, etc. That's made that worse, really, is that you're really focusing and seeing a lot of football and going, why don't we play like that? So I think there's been a change that way. I think, though, the core principles of what you look for and what you want are sort of simple, really, and that never really changes too much for me, because you're talking about talent for various positions, etc., and the qualities that they have, and that's got to marry up with what you want to do with your team and how you want to play and how your manager wants to be. And then the other bit with it is just that picking off the ages, etc., that you want to recruit at, and how you want to develop within your football club. And I think the principles of what you do are the most important bits. I think you can get too bogged down with looking at what other people do and go, it'd be great if we could do that and we could do this and we could have that player. And it's like, if that player's no good if it doesn't fit into your model and how you're playing, your style and what your manager wants, it's all got to come together. And I think a big part of, or massive part of what we do, I always call it, is the jigsaw, isn't it? It's about getting the right fit into that jigsaw that works for you. And so that it's, you are in competition with other clubs in doing this. But a player might be a great fit for Leicester, but it might not be a great fit at all for us because of how we play. We do things slightly differently, or what we want in terms of ages and what the manager's looking for. So I think there's always a balance within that. And there's been a changing style and a changing type, and there's a bigger emphasis on talent and technical ability now than there probably ever was. But I think the principles of what you do within your club, what you need, are the most important bit. That's your bedrock, really, to get that right.
Guy, do you want to come back to that?
Sorry, I just want to fine tune it a little bit. Martyn, what do you think not what Southampton thinks. What do you think? Like, I would have my opinion detached from Leicester. So my opinion is that balance and speed and power, especially the power end of it's coming slightly away from the player end because of the power side of the, I would say, you pulled up for a foul all the time. So the power and the strength side, when I'm scouting, I'm looking at players that maybe 3-4 years down the line, I have more balance than, say, the power. And these sorts of fine-tuning things that you look at and individually look at as a scout, say, again, respect to that terminology to you, because obviously you're, I would say, unbelievable pedigree, but the fine-tuning elements you look for in, say, the next 5 years, just from my own knowledge and whoever's bothered to listen.
I think from my perspective personally, this is an easy one. Then pace and power has always been massive for me. So I always think that's just huge. I always talk about. I probably drive everybody nuts at Southampton with this, but it's I can't help it. I always like to talk about things that you hang your hat on. So there's certain given things that you know. I always talk about day one when the player arrives at your club and goes out for his first training session. I just like to have in my mind nailed that I know when he walks out for that first session that he will do certain things. That the manager will come in afterwards and go, yeah, he's really good at that. It's the bit that you like hang your hat on it, is that, look, he will do that. And pace and power are key things to that. You know that will show regardless. So if a player is genuine quick, then he will see that. Whatever session you put on, he will see it. He can't help but come in and go, flipping at you right. Go, yeah, no, that's what he's got. That's a guarantee. That's a given. And I think there's things like that that are important in terms of making some of the decisions. And I think then if you look the way the Premier League has evolved, really, then those things are still there. So those pace and power traits within teams are key, and certainly when teams are playing counter-attack and the intensity of which teams play. So teams like Leeds that have done it, we sort of play a little bit that. Leicester certainly play that way. But they've got that ability to play on the counter-attack, and that energy and intensity and enthusiasm or whatever. But that's something that players that come to play for us have to have. If you haven't got that, you can be a great technician, but unless you're prepared to do the work and do the running, then it'd be very difficult in our team. And I think that would apply to several of those teams in the Premier League. So I think those key things of pace and power are still there. I still have that. I agree with the physical bit. That then changes it slightly, because then there's been a different emphasis now. Like you say, you can't touch players like you used to be able to. It's a little bit different now. So there's a little bit more subtlety in terms of what they do. But I still like the pace and power bit is still important for me. I think that carries through all the time. It's probably just take that physical edge off a little bit. And I think the other bit is, and it's the bit that doesn't get missed, but it's the hardest bit to quantify or to see, is just character. When you get players that people have watched time and time again abroad and never been quite sure about, and you're not sure, and he's not quite got this and quite. But when they come to the UK, if they're successful, it's often because you just buy into that, what an unbelievable character they are. They're just a dogged, determined, everything they've got day in, day out type of character. That gives them a hell of a chance of being a player. And I think there's those certain things that you've got to pick out that are a little bit different to what you just see and watch. It's like, okay, what else has he got? I talk to our guys all the time about anybody can scout, anybody can watch a game. It's different then to start picking off individual players. So the general stuff gets done. And once it gets down to the individual level, it's very important then to see everything. And we always talk all the time about just watching that player. Just watch him. Forget the game. Not interested in the game now. Just watch him. And you want to see everything. And it might be part of the warm-up. It might be what he does when they score a goal. It might be what they do after the game or whatever. What's it through social media? How does he react after the game? All the other bits, just know everything about that player. What does he bring to the table? So you've got all the bits you're looking for on the pitch. But then all the other bits about his character and his personality and his type, etc. That how does that fit to what you need within your football club? And I think they're the bits. That's the fun bit for me. That I enjoy scouting. I enjoy going to games, of course I do. But the fun bit when it gets really tight and really interesting, and you're trying to make those really cute decisions, really. And I think that's the bit that's the exciting bit of drilling down into it now. Right, what's he actually got? And that's where we have some fun with the other guys and the analysts and the data guys and whatever of what they do. And it's nice to do that. And sometimes there's little things that bother you. I call them my niggles. Of like, I've got a niggle about this. And there'd be little things like, just find more about that. Can we just check that carefully? And it's those guys are brilliant at pulling stuff together. They can then really analyze it and look at it and make that good decision. I think that's the exciting bit. That's the key bit. And that's the fun for me.
Yeah.
I don't know if that answers your question, Guy, but
Brilliant. I nitty gritty. You know, I watched a kid come off a bus once, going into the ground, and watching him. You know, his swagger as he walked off the bus with all these little tricks of the trade. You know, the wash bag, the earphones, and he was walking, bouncing about. And he was all excited. Then he had the worst warm up, and he, you know, went and scored 2. So, you know, all them little nitty gritties you're talking about, fantastic. And thank you so much, Martyn. Great insight.
Martyn, yeah, you mentioned data there. So obviously, and it's great to hear the passion coming out in your voice about, you know, going, you know, you're out on the field, you're in the stand watching players, you're watching the warm up, and you're passionate about their power and how they are on the pitch, and it's great to hear that. What about the data side of things? Tell us how that sort of evolved in your career and certainly at Southampton.
I think it's something that's changed massively over recent years, really. My first sort of proper involvement, we all played with little bits in the past and whatever, but the first time we got into it a little bit properly was probably at West Ham, and we appointed a data scientist at West Ham for that. That was the first time I got involved with somebody specifically to work within recruitment. And sadly for me, it didn't last very long, because it wasn't long after that we went. So he was still there. So that was just an intro for me to how we might use this and how we can use data to try help us make some of these decisions, and also filter down probably some a little bit about what we're trying to look at, and where some new talent might be that shows up because of data that we've not seen before. So that was the start of that, and we've probably gone on to a different level now at Southampton, and that was in place when I arrived, and they've been terrific. So Alex and his team do that really, really well, and they've been good at developing what they do and responding to what we think we need. It's amazing. I always think and it's because it's an area I'm not very good at, and so I'm learning, and probably learning is the wrong word. I'm probably listening more than I'm learning. Is that it's amazing when you speak to these guys that we often have conversations, and we'll casually at the end of it say, "Look, is there any? Could we do this?" And it might be comparing players to our players, or doing things in different countries, or getting certain types of data. It could be anything. And it's amazing how many times you say, "Can we do something? What could we ever get older?" Something like that. And they often say, "Yeah, we can do that." I'm like, "Well, go on then." It's just like they've got because they sort of take it for granted in a weird way, because they've got this incredible knowledge about use of data and what they can do and how they can get to information, how they can help and support us. And I always think, because it's not new now, but it's still relatively in its infancy in certain clubs, and I think they can do a lot more than they currently do. I think they can push themselves even further. They can have a bigger input, and we're trying, like mad at Southampton, to encourage that and encourage them to be part of it. So all our decisions and support work in terms of recruitment involves the data guys, data science, and I think that's a massive part of what we do. We had one meeting with them yesterday and did exactly that for certain positions. So it's key to what you do, really, in terms of supporting what you actually think, and also point you in certain directions. And yeah, the change in using these people has been terrific, and been a massively steep learning curve for me. But I say it, I always get to the end of it where you get used to what they show you and what they present and what it should look like. But I always at the end of it say, right, okay, put that in your words now. What exactly am I saying? I think I know what I'm saying, but I want you to explain that now, because I don't want to misread it. And it's that transition from country to country and understanding what that data set in that country means compared to the UK or the Premier League. I think that's the bit where I always feel like I need their help. It's like, okay, how does this stack up? How does this really fit? Am I seeing the truth, or am I just seeing something that will change radically if it comes to the UK? And those things are important, and getting that balance right. But yeah, there's some very knowledgeable guys now out there in clubs who are very, very bright, and they're not always your normal football conversation type guys in terms of what they know, but they've got terrific knowledge, and they're really great to have part of the process.
Yeah, club language. Club language. Sorry, I didn't realise I was on.
You're absolutely fine. One final question from me, Martyn, before we bring this section to a close, is that, all the structures that we've got in place now, all the data that we've just been talking about there. You've been doing this for a good period of time now. Do you feel that as an industry, as a collective of clubs, transfers are more efficient? Scouting and recruitment is more efficient than what it was 10, 15 years ago? Are we getting more hits than misses now than what we were 10, 15 years ago?
I think it's always a mixed bag, that. I think the difficulty you have with it is probably what I said before. It's the jigsaw bit of this, which is really, really important. And I think that everybody's striving for success and everybody's striving to do better, which is great, and that's what you want. But that brings with it its own problems. And so the problems of a lot of clubs is that you have one way of playing, or you have a particular style, a particular type, particular DNA, if you like, for what you want to do. And then when that manager changes, a new manager comes in with a different mindset, a different way he wants to play and use players in different ways, that throws a whole sort of set of problems for you then, in terms of, well, we've recruited that player to play specifically in this style, and he was exactly what we wanted and will be really good. New manager comes and goes, no, we're not playing that. I don't need that kind of player. So he then becomes a problem. And it's people judge your decisions based on how it is now, not on how it was when they actually walked in the building. And that is the hardest part, because it's constantly moving. And I think that's part of it. And also the whole settling in bit is always made. It's not a science, and it would be lovely if it was, but sadly it's not. And so that bit where you might get the ideal player, a perfect fit for what you want, and it's top talent. You bring him to, and he just doesn't settle, or his family don't want to come, or whatever it might be. There's a million issues there that mean that what you're trying to do then might not actually work, and it's really hard. I think we've all got to be honest, and I've always said it, is that I'll make mistakes, and the mistakes will come. And it's nice when you have a good period and you make 2 or 3 signs, and everything's great, and you're like, oh, hang on a minute. The mistakes will come, because they always do. So let's just be real about this and get a level. But hopefully you get more right than you get wrong. And I think that's the important bit. And that's even more so when you start to spend bigger money. The bigger money you spend, then the pressure builds a little bit on what you're investing in. So again, it comes back to that team bit of getting the guys around you, so don't make the big mistakes. Try and make smaller ones if you like, and get it right. So yeah, it's an interesting one though. I think it's better than it was. I think there's a lot more due diligence goes on now, and there's a lot more effort within the clubs to try to get these things right and use everything they've got. So it might be data, it might be analysis, it's live scouting, it's a million different things. But I think that group decision bit to get it right is important. But at the end, if you do all that, you can still get it wrong. That's the irony of it. That's with football.
Fantastic. Well, for the time being, thank you very much, Martyn. Stick around, because you're going to be involved in the next bit. But we'll bring in Jim. Hi, Jim.
Hey, Ryan. You okay, mate?
Yeah, I'm very, very well. So just to reintroduce you, Jim, you're obviously from Miller Insurance. Thanks for joining us. I've got to say, the last time we saw you, you were looking like Dave Grohl, and you've obviously the hairdressers are opened, and you've been out for a haircut. How was that?
Yeah, that's right, mate. That coupled with the fact that my baby son kept grabbing my hair, and I was waking up in the middle of the night with it in my mouth as well. It kind of made me think, yeah, I need to get my ears lowered. So yeah, I certainly feel a lot lighter now.
Ryan, have you frozen there, Ryan, a little bit?
Oh, no, I'm back. I think. Good stuff. So, Jim, just before you came on, England were playing last night. Now, one of the things that's very common about the England squad is most of them have got career-ending insurance through you guys. So I think that's a nice sort of segue for you to talk about what it is that you do and what it is that Miller Insurance does.
Yeah, thanks, Ryan. So to be exact on that, 26, we had 18 out of the 26 that's been announced now, which, I think probably 8 of them are right backs as well. But let's not go there. So in terms of what I do on a kind of day-to-day basis, as Ryan's mentioned, I work for Miller Insurance, and we focus on sports insurance specifically. So my kind of remit is working with individual footballers, agents, financial advisors who operate in this space, and football clubs as well, putting the right type of insurance in place to protect the player, really, because ultimately the player is an asset to the club. If something happens, the club aren't, as harsh as it sounds, they're not going to continue to look after him and continue to pay him. So these boys need to make sure that they're protecting these really lucrative contracts that they've got in place. And any future earnings thereafter. So, not to kind of go too technical with it and bore everyone. That is, essentially, what we do in a nutshell. Make sure that the players are insured against kind of any career-ending injury or illness.
And Jim, just talk to us about what is the mechanics of that? How do you work out how much a player should be insured for? And then what does it cost the player to insure themselves against that?
Yeah, so from an underwriting perspective, we work on the basis that players' gross annual salary, we can do up to a maximum of ×5 that. We take age obviously into the equation. Obvious reasons. If you're a 20-year-old player playing for a Premier League club, you've not kind of maximised or reached your full earnings potential, as opposed to being further down the line at say 30 years old, where you've earned a significant amount of money and therefore don't warrant as much cover. So we base it on the player's annual salary, and we certainly recommend that they maximise their cover from a younger age, and then obviously review it as they kind of go through that player life cycle.
And Jim, in terms of the club's responsibilities, let's say a player has a car accident and he can't play, and he's got 3 years left on his deal or whatever. What's the club's responsibility? How do the club deal with that scenario?
Well, I mean, first and foremost, all of this is going to be in the public domain, such a scenario like that. So, the club's got to be careful from a, PR point of view, because they're going to come under public scrutiny if they're not deemed to have looked after the player. But, if we go black and white and basically look at what's in the contract, the club aren't obligated by any means to continue paying the player for the remainder of his contract. And there is a clause in the contract which is state that they'll give a notice period of 6 months, and then that's it essentially. If it's as kind of dramatic or catastrophic as a car accident, obviously there's not going to be any kind of period of rehabilitation associated with that. So it doesn't even give the player any kind of grace, if you like, to still earn for a number of months and try and demonstrate his fitness and get back playing.
Yeah, and Jim, this isn't something that we think about as something it will never happen. This is something that's actually coming to fruition, and there's claims being made every single year. I'm a Wolves fan. I know the goalkeeper, Carl Hakimi, he obviously had to stop playing because he had leukemia. My understanding is that he had some insurance in place. We saw Ryan Mason having to retire as well. And of course, we've had the Jimenez injury this year. And as positive Wolves are being about it, I don't think there's any certainty about what's going to happen to him. So my question to you is that from your industry understanding, what percentage of Premier League players have got this cover in place? And actually, is the that gap of people who haven't got it in place, is that bigger than what people would imagine?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, if we kind of focus on the Premier League to start with, and I think it's fair to say it's predominantly made up of foreign players, and herein lies a bit of an education and language barrier sometimes with players actually taking insurance. And sometimes I think it's fair to say insurance can be a bit of a cultural buy in that certain players, German, Scandinavian players, tend to be more clued up on it and more kind of, I want to get this in place. Whereas, your South Americans and your Spanish kind of have that siesta mentality towards it. And, they kind of, some of them realize the importance, but it's almost, I'll do it next week. And then invariably it never happens. There's been lots of examples of players who've had the opportunity to take insurance and haven't taken it, and then something's happened. One that always springs to mind is Joe Thompson, who's obviously had a really unfortunate kind of road, if you like, in terms of his playing career. But he's bounced back. But he has, and he often cites the fact that he did have insurance, put in front of him, and it was a case of him just saying yes or no if he wanted it, and he never got round to it. And then obviously, he suffered with his illness. I always think that, if we talk outside of professional football as well, that, I'm pretty sure that most of us will have some form of insurance in place to protect, not just ourselves, but our dependents. So, it's no different in football, and really, or arguably, that it's even more important with the amount of money that these guys are earning and the kind of length of contracts that are in place. So to kind of go a bit of a long way around, but to kind of answer your original question, I mean, I'd say as a guesstimate, probably 60% of players just in focusing on the Premier League have the cover. But I think it's fair to say that, it should be a lot higher than that, the percentage.
Absolutely. Guy, did you ever have any of this type of career-ending insurance in place when you were playing?
Yeah, we went through the PFA providers at the time. We were, I suppose, aimed that way from my financial advisor. I think it's very, very important for young lads to set out their plans for their career, pensions, financial advice, all these things that needed sorting, and I did it. I did stop it after probably 5-10 years, and didn't connect, and I was lucky enough to get away with it, as they say. But I think it's hugely important, and I would have carried it on if financially it was viable for me at the time, but unfortunately it wasn't.
Yeah. Ryan, I was just going to say, I've just shared on the chat there, we're going to do a special free webinar with Jim, so that particularly for the agents and people at clubs, if you have any further questions, because there's a lot of detail in there, isn't there, Jim? So we're going to do a webinar with Jim. It's on Tuesday the 15th of June at 11 o'clock. So I'll put the link in there and you'll see it. I'll send it out to everyone in the Football Transfer Forum community. So, make sure you log on there, and we can get into a lot more detail, because there's quite a number of issues that we probably need to speak about.
Okay, just before we let you go, Jim, I did allude to it at the start, so I've got to press you on it. Have you been contacted for people getting their insurance sorted here in the UK from players that are currently not based here?
I'll be honest with you, Ryan, not as of yet. I think it's probably that little bit too early still, only because obviously, it's end of season, players are on holiday or in Portugal, everyone kind of seems to be. That said, and you got the Euros, and funnily enough, I was having a chat with an agent yesterday about how the Euros is obviously a platform for, kind of those kind of unknown talents, if you like, to kind of demonstrate and showcase their capabilities. So, I imagine Guy and Martyn will have a kind of a key eye on that as well. If they can unearth some, good talent there.
You've dodged that. You've dodged that, Jim, because I know for a fact that you know exactly what's going on. So just text me later. But stick around, because there's some questions for you a bit later on as well. But thanks for now. And so, Tony, so we're going to move on to the panel discussion, which is going to be about the summer transfer window this morning. So I'll come to you. I know you've been busy already. How do you see this summer going? It's the first summer of the GBE rules being tested, and we've already seen that with some players and managers. Looks like Wolves have paved the way for their new manager to get a GBE work permit this week as well. How are you gauging the temperature? Yeah,
it's interesting, Ryan, because let's face it, we've had 14 months of no fans in the pandemic. I mean, if we're talking about the Premier League, I think in some respects it's actually strengthened the Premier League's hand. Although clubs have lost a hell of a lot of money through gate receipts, obviously most of the Premier League funding is coming directly from TV revenue, and obviously that in some other countries has been damaged, but not in England. And I think what it's created for the Premier League is it's a real, it's a buyer's market, and the Premier League clubs are probably the only clubs that have a great deal of money available to use in transfer fees. And then when you look at, countries such as France and Spain, so a lot of those clubs are really struggling. So perhaps, it is a buyer's market. I don't know how many Premier League clubs, and it'd be interesting to hear from Martyn and Guy. I don't know how many Premier League clubs will go, really go in hard, so to speak. I know the chairman, Khaldoon Al-Murabak of Man City, said they're going to go and spend, and they're going to invest in one or two quality players. But it'd be interesting to see what the rest of, the Premier League do. Looking further down, I think the Championship will be very, very quiet, transfer fee wise. Everyone's got to get the squads together, but I don't think we'll see big transfer fees being paid in the Championship. I think there'll be a lot of, free agents done. You might even see some swap deals happening. I know, it's hard enough to do one transfer, but to get one player going in one direction, another player going in the opposite direction, that might happen more because clubs need to do that. They won't have the money to necessarily spend. So I think, look, everyone's taken a financial hit. I think the Premier League are in a strong position compared to other leagues in Europe, other clubs in Europe. You look at the big Spanish clubs, their financial status is really poor at the moment. And when you look at France, their TV deal went down. Some of the clubs are going bust in France, so it really is a buyer's market. And I think those clubs that are selling won't get anywhere near the amounts of money that they perhaps would have got for a player two seasons ago.
Yeah. Martyn, let me take you back to 1996. I'm 14 years old. I'm on the French exchange, and I'm watching this guy called Karel Poborský just ripping up the tournament. And of course, he went on, Manchester United snapped him up. We're not going to be surprised by any players in the Euros, are we? Nobody's going to jump out at us like that because we know about everybody now, don't we? But how closely are Southampton watching the Euros?
Yeah, there's always, I think we tend to approach it, or certainly I tend to approach it with a view that you can be careful with this, but the word is simple, which is you just don't sign off a tournament. I think it's a nice little top up to what you know about certain players and some of the slightly fringe ones, or some from countries where certainly over the last 12 months you've not been able to watch players live as much or at all, or done the same amount of work you might have done previously. It's a good opportunity to catch up with where they're at and compare them with some of the bigger teams and some of the bigger countries and see what they're actually like at that level. So it gives you a real opportunity to see where they're at. But yeah, it's a dangerous one just to jump and react off the back of it. I think if you've done your work and you're prepared and it's something that's on your radar and you're quite strong on, then yeah, it's a nice little backup to where you think he's at. And that's what we tend to do. Similarly, some players will have a bad tournament, and that doesn't necessarily mean he's a bad player. And I think it's use it for levels for me. Get a feel for levels and what he's like against different opposition, different types or styles. And yeah, it's interesting from there. So it'll be good. It'll be interesting. But yeah, there's not many that you won't have at least a basic understanding and a basic knowledge of. It's more than the tuning your information, really, I think.
And Martyn, are you going to be cautious in this summer transfer window? How's Southampton looking at it?
Yeah, I think we'll be relatively cautious. I think like a lot of clubs, there are certain things that you need to do or you have to do because you've got natural holes in your squad, and there's other things that you would like to do, all things being equal. And I think that's where the difficulty is. So we've got one or two key things that we need to sort out, and we will do, and we'll find some money or some way of working to make that happen. I think the other bits will be dependent on opportunity. And I think what you said is right, is that in some ways it's a buyer's market, but also there will be opportunities that pop up that you wouldn't necessarily at this moment in time might not think's there. Also, the clubs need to sell, or they need to be creative or do something a little bit different. I think that's where you might be able to find something of use later in this window as it sort of unravels a little bit, really. And that's what hopefully might pop up. And if we're in a position to take advantage of that, then great. But you're right. I think there's some of the big clubs will have serious money because they always have. I think some of the mid and lower end of the Premier League clubs will be a little bit more cautious at the minute because we have taken a financial hit, and I think we have to be sensible about what we do now and just use our money wisely. And probably the other bit that's counter to it is that because it's a buyer's market, that the players that you might normally look to move on or sell, etc., the market's disappeared for them as well. So in terms of what you might get as an income, then to be reinvest, that might not be there this summer. So it'll be a tough window. This it'll be different, very different, I think, to normal.
Yeah, and of course, you know, I guess the worry, the concern is, of course, is keeping your best players as well. You know, I've just wrote 3 down there: Danny Ings, you know, for me, Redmond, Ward-Prowse. I could see Ward-Prowse at Leicester, me, Tony.
Don't you be starting transfer rumours. You know, we've got about Southampton. We can always ask Guy what he feels.
Martyn, how does the comms work in? he's had enough. How do the comms work? How do the comms work on the people that are being involved with players potentially exiting the clubs? I guess they're constantly keeping you updated about what might be happening outwards as well.
Yeah, no, we're on that all the time. So I'm involved in that process really, and some of the players that might go out. So I'm part of that with the chief exec, etc. So we manage that quite well internally, and it's the younger players are a little bit different because you're looking to move them on for different reasons. So a lot of them will be going out on loan for developments and so on, and that's handled by Pathways, and they can do that and have some involvement in it. But you want that to happen, and the clubs are welcoming that this year, which will be nice. So hopefully you can get some good loan moves from those young players. The more senior ones that have not been around it, then yeah, that's a bigger challenge at the minute, particularly with the way the markets are abroad. So if you've got foreign players that you ideally want to move back abroad, then their market's been decimated. So it's trying to get value at the minute is difficult, and you're weighing that with how long's he got left on his contract and trying to get something back rather than letting it run out and you get nothing, and what is the right thing, and when you press the button to say yes or not. And that's just a constant feel for where you think it is and what we think is fair at this moment in time.
Yeah. Speaking of loans, Guy, can you see this summer being, you know, the loan window? Can you see just a huge amount of loans happening?
Yeah, I can see it. Again, it depends on. Again, we're just going to go from that player point of view. Do the players really want to play? And you know, they can sit on their big contracts at, say, Southampton, Leicester, whatever club we're talking about, and do they really want to go into the European leagues and go and play football again after a long period of time out? Maybe. I'm a big believer in our young lads should go out and play. So I'm hoping there's a lot of action, and the way the phones have been going recently, that it's starting to develop. And I might have said that the next couple of weeks will be, I would say, so important in regards to lads getting into pre-seasons with their new clubs. So I expect my calls to increase dramatically, really. And I've had lots of calls. So it will be a long window. I think first team players should be going out and getting some loan time if they're not in and around the team, in and around the squad. And I also think, you know, that the 23 should be playing men's football anyway. So I'm hoping to push some lads into some good moves this year and be involved in some real good developments like it was last season.
Martyn, I wanted to ask you, how is the loan market, especially for those under 23s players, is that becoming very competitive? Because you want to loan your under 23 players to get them first team football. Guys trying to do the same. All the top 10 clubs are trying to do the same. There's only so many spaces. The loans are limited. How do you see that part of football? It sort of goes under the radar, really, I think, in terms of what we talk about. But my observation is that that's getting a very crowded market, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. There's a lot of young players that are looking for opportunities, really, and that's the hardest bit. And also with that, trying to find the right moves, the right opportunities with the right sort of coaches and staff and whatever that will support them and help them. Because everybody wants it needs to be a success, really, and that's it's easy to take a young player on loan and add him to a squad when you've not necessarily got a great deal of investment in financially and so on. So if it doesn't work for the club that takes him, sometimes it doesn't really matter. But for us, it's key. And it's like, look, there's no point going somewhere for 6 months and sitting on a bench or not being part of it and not playing. You need that development. That's why this period now is the best opportunity, because teams are starting to put their squads together in those leagues. And I think that's, if you can get your player as part of that and they see him as part of that squad moving forward for the season, that starts pre-season with them, you give them the best chance. The ones that They're the ones that you don't like as much, the ones that come right at the end of the window, and you sometimes feel it's a little bit like a top up to the squad, and you're like, he's not really part of the plans. He's just a nice addition, and they make me a little bit more nervous. I like the ones that we can get done now, get them away to the right places, and they invest in and put the time in. That's lovely. It's the best one for the players.
And what about the first team bringing a player in on loan, Martyn? Is that something that you would ever consider at Southampton?
Yeah, we do. No, we don't. We like to bring players in on loan. We've had a couple this last season, so we will use the loan market again this year. It's nice with certainly with young players. If you've got the potential to do it with a view to a permanent deal after it, and that's what you want. You don't really want to be developing young players for other teams in a nice sense just to send them back. It's nice to have a view that there might be an end product to it. So that's sort of the way we tend to try to approach it. But yeah, it's a great tool to see the fit and see how they fit with your group, and you might be able to give some players that get stuck at some of the bigger clubs a real opportunity to go and play Premier League football, which is a big ask for everybody. So it's a good opportunity.
And
I was going to ask Ryan about.
Go on, Tony.
I was just going to say to Martyn and to Guy, we've had 3 promoted teams from the Championship. Obviously Norwich as champions, who won it quite well comfortably in the end, really, and obviously have just dropped down, so they've only had 1 season out of the Premier League. Watford, who the same, had a real strong finish, and then I suppose Brentford, who it's a particular favourite club of mine. They've done absolutely fantastic, just missed out last year, and this time they got promoted with the playoff final, which is the best way to get promoted if you guarantee promotion, if you know what I mean. How do you think, they're going to be into the league of the rest, the top 6 and the other 14? How do you think they're going to fare, them 3 clubs this time in the Premier League, and obviously Brentford for the first time?
I'm the first, mine.
Yeah, Guy, for you first. Yeah.
Okay. Watford, I think, particularly strong because they had, I would say, huge connections with the European scene. I think they'll do particularly well with the deals that they're probably planning to do already. I like the idea of Norwich being successful. They're playing some really good football, top team this year. I've watched them no end of times, but I think they could bounce in and out again. And with Brentford, we love them because we're in recruitment. Everything they tick a lot of our boxes and excite us in the way they recruit, in the way they find products and find some unbelievable players. But again, I think the infrastructure is small compared to the big 14, and I think they'll struggle as well. So out of my 3, I think Watford will probably stay and the other 2 will drop again.
Martyn?
Yeah, I think he's probably hit the nail on the head, really. You expect Watford to be able to bridge that gap. So when they got relegated, they hung on to some of their key players that they wanted to hang on to with a view to bouncing back. Now they've done that, you would think they'll invest as well and add to that. So there's no reason why they shouldn't be a strong contender for staying up this next season. They should be around that. You would think they'd have a real chance. The other 2, it's harder, isn't it? And it's one of those, really. It's not impossible. I think if they stay true to what they're about as teams and the way they play, with it getting too bogged down into what the Premier League actually is and get too phased by it, then you never know what might come. And it's probably Sheffield United the previous year when it's first season up and they just did what they did really, really well. And they were fantastic, and it was a breath of fresh air. I think the reality kicks in the year after when you go, right, can I do that again? Now we know what it actually is, and I think that's the hardest bit. And I think it's very interesting for certainly a Brentford, which is like the newer boy really making that jump up of, right, go on then. This will be a nice test for you now, and it's a test for some of these players that they've done a terrific job in terms of recruitment. It'd be good to see how that marriage now going into the Premier League, and they will obviously lose potentially 1 or 2 of those you would expect as they go up, which then makes it even harder. So it'd be interesting.
I wanted to ask you about that, Martyn, because one of the Norwich sometimes get praised for being very open about what their strategy is. They're not going to bust the bank. They're going to look to recruit with efficiency. But does that leave them open to, yourselves or Leicester or Wolves or someone like that looking at Todd Cantwell and Max Aarons and being able, do you know what, we're going to be able to go and get him at a better price because we know they'll sell at some point. We don't need to go over the top.
I think so. That market is there. The difficulty you have with teams like that is, and the players who've done particularly well by the nature of what they've just done, is their actual valuation will be quite high, and that's where that actually is still quite tough. So you mentioned a Max Aarons type or whatever, but that won't be a low deal. That'll be a very expensive deal. Wendy will be a similar ilk, really. They'll be expensive deals to try to pull off, and they probably go beyond where our market would normally be. So that makes it difficult for us. So I think there's one or two players that will either go to the big boys or they may stay. The key is that next season, if they do stay, then if they can maintain the status, then great. If they go again, those are the kind of players that then might look to leave. It's like, look, we'll give it a chance, and that's it. So yeah, it's a tester.
Guy, what do you think about that? Do you think Max Aarons and James Ward-Prowse will end up at Leicester?
Just going into that, all because they've had a good season in the Championship, unfortunately doesn't qualify. They'll step into the Premiership on extensive, wages and also extensive costings to then sit there and drop into our club or drop into Southampton, drop into another Premier League club, not plugged in one. And I just think that a lot of these players have been successful in the Championship for the reason of the Championship. It's a good league, but it's also the Championship, not the Premier League. And this is the difficulty a lot of these teams have when they come up. They then sell a few players, they then have a little transition change, they then have a style of play change and get found out by the Premier League, because the Premier League is the best league in the world. So, and it's not really a negative towards them either. It's a difficult league to really work out where you can then drop these Championship players into. And we mentioned some fantastic players in the Championship. It's very difficult in that Premier League. And I've watched a lot of both leagues. So I'm really excited to see where it goes. And like I said, and these valuations will always be high after promotion, but they are just valuations made up from the market.
Martyn, I wanted to ask you about Scottish players. So, we've had a resurgence at Rangers. Celtic have had a big wobble. But, the Premier League has for a long time recruited from Scotland. You've got a couple of Scottish players at Southampton. Is that still an interesting market, or is it beginning to just dissipate a little bit? How do you see the Scottish market?
I think for me, it's a market that you can potentially get some young talent and some young players, and it's one that we sort of still view as there's opportunities there with some young talented players. The harder bit, it's not quite the same as they get older in Scotland by the nature of how that tends to work. So it's not one that we focus on all the time, but it's one we're very aware of. We've got obviously people like Stewie Armstrong, who's come from there, who's done terrific. So Stewie's been great. I'm not quite classing Shea as that. But yeah, Stewie for sure has been terrific for us, and it's a little bit underrated player sometimes along the way. He's been absolutely magnificent. So there's players there that can do it in the Premier League for sure. But I think we tend to look at the younger end of that and see where the opportunities are to get some young talented talent out of there. But it's not what. Yeah, I think if you go back quite a number of years ago, then I looked at it heavily. And I think a lot of clubs did for bringing young players out. It sort of changed a little bit from that, but yeah, there's still young talent up there to get after. So it's interesting, just different.
Good. So I want to ask you directly, Martyn. Tony and
not about Prowse.
Not about Ward-Prowse. Not about Ward-Prowse. What for you is the best market in Europe? Where France has been very, very popular. Obviously, Spain and Portugal have been very popular. But for you, what market do you look at and think that they are producing the biggest abundance of top players appropriate for the Premier League?
I've always viewed France as being the big one for me. Always has been, and it always produces players. I think it's a great market in terms of adaptation to English football. It's great in terms of just new talent arriving. It's amazing when you go and watch younger teams or whatever out in France that you often, I think some of the senior teams, to be fair, that you will turn up at games and see a player and who is that? And I love that. That's just brilliant when you're like, who is that player? Who is he? It's like, where's he come from? And it's terrific for doing that, on unearthing something new. And it's Lille have had some great success recently and done terrific this last season. Done brilliant in terms of their recruitment, and there's been some young players. But everybody's aware of sort of some of the big players, or that they've gone out and bought and done things like that. But they've also brought some players in that they've nicked out of PSG as a young player and whatever, and that's come through and done terrific. So they've been clever in terms of what they're doing. I always think it's just a really, really good market.
Tony, I know you've got lots of connections in France. Do you expect a lot of French players to come into the English game in the summer?
I think there'll be one or two. I think the GBE. Going back to Brentford. Brentford have signed some really good players from League Two in France, and maybe now they're in the Premier League, they can buy them out of League One. But that's been a market that's been very profitable. I'm thinking of Neil Maupay and Ben Rama and players like that coming out of the second league. And the same as the Bundesliga too, as well. There's some good players in that league as well that seemingly won't get a GBE certificate. So, yeah, I do. I mean, for me, it's. I think the French clubs with the financial collapse of the TV deal, they're forced sellers. Some of those clubs will have to sell some of their assets just to pay the bills. And I think some of the players, I mean, when Martyn mentioned Lille, Lille put price tags on their players for the Premier League that start at 50 million and go higher, So maybe some of those prices will come down. Maybe some of the players, a well-run club might take the view of, we're not going to sell him this summer. Let's wait and see things settle down, and we'll sell our major asset in next summer, and we'll keep hold of him for a season. And it was very competitive at the top end of the French league, wasn't it? And it was a really good finish. And Monaco were up there, Lyon were up there, and obviously PSG didn't win it by a street, which has caused problems at that club. So it will be very interesting. I agree with Martyn. I love the French market. I mean, we were supposed to be at the Toulon tournament, me and you, Ryan, and that had to be postponed. And I think there was it was 2 years ago that I went to the Toulon tournament, and there was a handful of players there that you'd have took all day long in the Premier League. And unfortunately, we're missing it this summer, but it'd be nice to get out there this time next year.
Absolutely. Martyn, I always try and find a way of crowbarring French football in, because I like to ask the guests, why did you never sign Gignac? The boy Gignac, who's now playing in Mexico, he's my all-time modern footballer. Did you ever watch him? Do you ever aware of him?
Yeah, I did do quite a lot, to be fair. I think it was the work rate and whatever that you were never quite sure about with Gignac. He had the ability to score goals, and he was a talent that way, but you were never quite sure he'd buy into what the other side of it might be. I've always my sort of one starting one, and it's just to drop a name in for a bit of fun, really. But when was at Blackburn, I took Steven and Zonzi from Amiens, who just got relegated. They just got relegated from the second league in France to the third, so they dropped out of the second league at the end of that season. And he was a young kid, about 19, Stephen. And it took a lot of persuading for the chairman at Blackburn to be convinced that he was going to be the right player to come to play in the Premier League at Blackburn Rovers. We managed to persuade him, but I think we spent 400 grand on Stephen as a young kid at that level. And he came in that year and he played every game that season and was player of the year at Blackburn in the Premier League. And so that transition from being a second league player, young player at that level, and to literally drop straight in the Premier League and deliver at the level he did were just terrific. And that was probably a really early starter for me, is like, what a market this is. And that's it's not even coming from the top league. It was terrific. So there's lots of those examples, I think, and that was a good one for me.
I mean, I remember, Stephen, the size and the physicality of him was great as well. Is he still playing? I wonder if anyone on the call knows if he's still
in Seville.
Where is he now? Is he in
Seville? I think went out to Spain, finished in Seville, didn't he?
Has he finished? Or
he did. No, he's still playing. He's still playing. His agent contacted me only last week and said, "Would you have any interest in Steven and Zonzi?" So it was just quite funny. So I said, "Yeah, send him your regards. He knows who I am."
How old will he be now then, Martyn? He must be.
I'm not sure what he actually is. He'll be in mid-30s now. So he's
he's no Gignac. He was all right. He's no Gignac.
Can I mention a league before we go?
Yes, go on, Dan.
I'm just doing a lot of work in it over the years. Belgian market for me is an unbelievable market for a high-end championship plus Premier League quality, but a lot lower cost. And having worked with Leuven a lot with a few of our lads playing top level football over there, it's just such a mixture of French and Dutch. Obviously with the Belgium and the Flemish, it's a great market to go and dip into, even in the lower leagues. You know, I watched. I mean, Man City have gone into Lommel. Barnsley owners have gone into a team underneath. You know, there's a lot of money floating around going into the lower leagues now. Obviously, Brighton have gone and bought a club out there. We've got a club, so it's a clever league to look into, in my opinion.
Yeah, have you seen the top scorer guy in Belgium? He's at Genk, Paul.
Samatta came out of there, didn't he? Berg came out of Genk as well, didn't he?
Paul I think he's got about 30 odd goals this season. Have you seen
there's
him?
some characters out there scoring some goals, and they're flagging up on the English market. But again, it might be difficult with their rules and our rules and how you get them across. But it's all worth researching, isn't it? And as you're going to do your development and as you're going to do your recruitment process. Absolutely.
A few questions from the audience before we finish off today. First one for you, Jim. And the question is insurance offered to recruitment staff, coaches, managers in an end of career manner as well? Such a life-changing event where they have to look after themselves or another family member, or is it just players?
Just players, to be honest with you, Ryan. I mean, these guys can kind of take their own personal insurance, you know, just do it online, to be honest. But yeah, there isn't a kind of specific product, you know, for the backroom staff.
Okay. All right. Thanks. I'm looking. That's a good answer, but maybe not the one people wanted to hear. But that is what it is. Question for you, Martyn, from Yarno. He said you talked about new managers at clubs benchmarking players that used to be perfect for the team. Do you think a manager should look more to the data from players and their playing style and put together a team based on that instead of what he thinks?
I think in terms of recruitment, it's something you definitely should use, and we certainly use it. So I think that's the case. And when we present players to the manager, then we use everything. So we use video, we use data, we use analysis stuff, we look at reports, everything, and that's part of that presentation and why they fit. I think in terms of your own players, then data in terms of physical data and lots of other bits are important and part of that process. But the managers are switched on to all this stuff now, so they tend to know where that data set is and what that looks like and what it's capable of, because they use it for training loads and a million other different things. So it's part of that. But at the end of the day, again, the key bit is the manager picks the team. So as part of that, with his backroom staff in terms of your own players and in terms of recruitment with us, then he's going to take advice, but he's part of that process. But ultimately, he will say yes or no on whether a player plays on a Saturday, and that's key. And I think his eye and his feeling from training during the week is massively part of that. It's got to be.
And Martyn, just as a bit of a follow-up to that about head coaches and managers, and listen, there's a few positions available at the moment, isn't there? Is there some sort of succession planning that you are looking at in clubs, Martyn, so that the senior staff at the club, you're going to need a new manager sooner rather than later in the Premier League? I think the shelf life is 12, 14 months, something like that. So are you actively looking around Europe or the Championship or other Premier League teams and thinking, oh, I like that coach, I like what he does with his players, I like that seems to fit with our model? Is it just as we've talked about the players? Are the head coaches being scouted and looked on at recruitment meetings?
Yeah, I think they are. Yeah, they certainly are. I think it'd be remiss in most clubs now not to do that. Like you say, the shelf life suggests that you will need one eventually. So it's the right thing to be doing that in the background. It's not something you make a big deal out of, but new coaches that are progressing well or working in a certain way. And with us, it would be an emphasis on working with young players and developing players and the production line of that and whatever. Then that's they always catch the eye, and we're always aware of where they're up to and what people are doing. I think and that culture fit for types and styles and whatever is important for does it fit to your club. So I think most clubs would do that these days. I think that certainly goes on, and it's sometimes a bit quicker than they probably should do, in terms of sometimes you see the changeover of managers and thinking that was done in advance. But I think it's nice, but at least they're doing it properly, to be fair. So it's got to be done. It's a massive part of what you do, isn't it? Huge. So
Yeah, and I think actually Southampton have come out with a bit of credit, really, I think, in terms of how people have perceived the club, because there's been a couple of really heavy defeats some bad runs in there as well, but he has in other areas had some great runs as well. And I always say, if actually all those results had been jumbled up rather than it was a succession of wins and then a succession of losses, then people wouldn't be talking. So how do you feel about things internally in terms of manager tenure at Southampton? Is it something where you want to book the trend, or?
Yeah, I think we've tried to with this, and I think the club as a whole has tried to do the right thing in terms of making the right decision. And it's very easy on the back of some poor results, or a poor result particularly, to react to that and make a knee-jerk reaction. When I think the idea for the club was to have a longer-term project, and I know the idea for Ralph as the manager was he was to be part of that project and develop lots of things in the background. And there's been lots of changes within the football club and playing style and structures and so on that have been put in place that we all see as the right way forward. And I think that's key, really, and that helps you make that decision at that time to go, hang on, let's not get too carried away. Let's take our time and do the right thing here. Because it's very easy to change everything. You change the manager, he brings new staff and new ideas and new ways, and all of a sudden you're like, well, we're starting again. This is crazy. This is just madness. So I think the club have been very good at supporting that and making sure that we don't lose sight of the direction we're trying to travel, and hopefully that can continue. So yeah, but a few nice results that start next season won't miss. It'd be good.
Absolutely. Okay, guys, we've come to the end of the session. As always, the time has absolutely flown. Martyn, I want to thank you especially. I really enjoyed that. I really appreciate your insight. I think for all of us working in football, the things that Southampton have achieved in terms of the players that they've produced themselves and some of the quality that you've been able to bring in has impressed everybody. So, thank you so much for your time this morning.
No problem. Thanks, guys. No problem.
Yeah, thanks, Martyn. Appreciate it.
Guy, I hope you have a great trip to Portugal and your networking.
So I've got out. That's what I said to the missus. I'm networking, so it gets you out there. I tell you, it's a get out of jail free card.
He's always working, Guy. He's always.
Jim, I look forward to your text a bit later of all the players that are going to be signing. Looking forward to that. But thank you for your time.
No worries.
Thanks, Jim.
And as Tony mentioned, there is a separate dedicated session to this topic, which Tony will send out again.
Yeah, we'll get it out of him in the free webinar a week on Tuesday. So just be ready. I'm going to be grilling you on that. But just before we go, I'll just mention the partnership that we have with the European Football Agents Association. Me and Ryan have hosted Doing Business In series. I think we've done 7 now. So we've done all of the European countries, and now we find ourselves doing business in England. A lot of the people on this call will be experienced agents who've done a lot of business in England. It's a how-to guide. It's on the 24th of June, a Thursday morning, 9:30 kickoff in the UK, so a little bit earlier. And then we've got another one in July that what it's going to be, it's like a European overview. So all of the guests we've had on our Doing Business In series, so we've done Germany, Portugal, Spain, USA, Brazil, France, Italy, and then we'll have done England. It'll just be a little bit of an update and a view and looking at the early trends in this first summer transfer window after COVID. So that'll be an interesting webinar. And again, it's a 9:30 kickoff on Thursday the 15th. But listen, guys, I've really enjoyed it. If 90 minutes of football went this quick, I might have made it as a player.
Fantastic. Thank you for everybody tuning in as well. Really appreciate your time, and we look forward to seeing you again next month. So thank you very much. Have a great weekend.
Thanks, Ryan.
Bye-bye.
Cheers, guys.
Bye, guys. Thanks, Martyn. Brilliant. Thank you.
Cheers.